My name is Ariana Cole. I was 38 years old the morning I learned that loyalty has an expiration date, especially when it's one-sided. It was 6:41 a.m. when my phone lit up on the kitchen counter. The sun hadn't fully come up yet. The coffee machine was still warming, making that low grinding sound that usually comforted me. I expected an alert from work, maybe a reminder I'd forgotten to clear. Instead, it was a text from my older sister, Renee. No greeting. No hey. Just one sentence. We think it's best if you don't come to Mom's anniversary dinner tonight. It's meant to be intimate. I read it twice, then a third time, slower. My name wasn't mentioned. No explanation followed. Just that word, best, like a decision made in a room I wasn't invited into. I checked the time again. Early. Intentional. Like they wanted to deliver it before the day could soften me, before I could ask questions or convince myself I'd misunderstood. I didn't respond. I poured the coffee anyway, even though my hands felt oddly steady for someone whose chest had just hollowed out. The anniversary dinner had been planned for weeks. I'd paid for half of it, actually. The restaurant deposit. The floral arrangement my mother wanted because it made things feel special. I remembered her voice when she asked. Light, casual, practiced. You're so good with money, Ari. You don't mind, right? I'd never minded. That was the problem. 14 years. That's how long I'd been quietly financing stability for people who called it family. I didn't announce it. I didn't keep score out loud. I just handled things. Rent gaps. Medical copays. School fees. Emergency flights. Credit cards that accidentally maxed out before vacations. I took my mug to the table and opened my laptop. Not dramatically. Not because I planned to confront anyone. It was muscle memory at this point. The spreadsheet was already there, saved as something deliberately boring. Household assistance. I'd named it that years ago, back when I told myself I was being organized, not suspicious. Rows filled the screen. Dates stretching back over a decade. Amounts. Notes written by a younger version of me who still believed circumstances change people. Short-term help. One-time support. Just until things settle. I scrolled without rushing, letting the numbers stack up the way they always did when I allowed myself to look too closely. I'd logged everything. Not because I expected repayment, but because something in me needed proof that I wasn't imagining the imbalance. I highlighted the total cell and watched to calculate. The number didn't shock me anymore. What stung was how normal it felt. Not once had anyone asked if I was okay carrying it. Not when I worked 2 jobs in my early 30s. Not when my own health insurance lapsed for a month because I prioritized my father's prescription refill. Gratitude, when it came at all, was always followed by another request. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. The text buzzed again. A follow-up from Renee. Hope you understand. I smiled then. A tight, humorless thing. Understanding had always been my assigned role. I typed back 6 words. Message received. I'll handle my end. I didn't explain. I didn't ask for clarification. I didn't defend myself. I wasn't angry yet. What I felt was something cleaner. I stood and walked to the hallway closet, the one I'd cleaned out last spring when my mother asked me to hold on to a few important documents. Inside, tucked behind winter coats, was a slim folder. Property paperwork. Account authorizations. Copies of things I'd signed without ceremony over the years because someone else was panicking. On top sat the paperwork for my mother's townhouse. Legally, it was mine. It always had been. I'd stepped in 12 years earlier when my parents were on the brink of foreclosure after a series of temporary setbacks. My name went on the deed because my credit was clean and my income verifiable. They promised it was just procedural, that it didn't mean anything. I believed them. I always believed them. By mid-morning, I'd made 3 phone calls. Calm ones. Professional. No raised voices. No drama. Just confirmations. By noon, the catering deposit for the anniversary dinner was canceled. The refund processed back to my account. I didn't feel victorious. I felt corrected, like a bone finally set back into place. The thing about that text, the one telling me I didn't belong, it didn't hurt because it was cruel. It hurt because it was honest. I wasn't family when it came to celebration, only when something needed to be covered. I remember the beginning clearly. I was 24, newly promoted, proud of my first real paycheck. My dad called, voice strained. Rent was late. Just 1 month. Could I help? I wired the money that night. No questions. No hesitation. That month turned into years. And standing there in my quiet kitchen, anniversary dinner ticking closer on a calendar I was no longer part of, I finally admitted something I'd avoided for a long time. Love shouldn't require invisibility. I picked up my phone again, not to respond, but to silence it. The rest could wait. I didn't go to the anniversary dinner, obviously. I didn't drive past the restaurant or stalk anyone's stories. I went to work like it was any other weekday, answered emails, sat through a meeting about quarterly forecasts that suddenly felt small in comparison to the quiet recalibration happening inside me. The thing about being the dependable one is that people stop noticing the cost. Reliability becomes your personality. Stability becomes your contribution. And once that happens, anything less than total availability feels like betrayal to them. By mid-afternoon, my phone started lighting up. First my mother. Ari, are you feeling okay? Renee said you sounded off. Then my younger brother, Mark. Hey, weird question. Did you cancel something? The restaurant's asking about deposits. I didn't respond. Instead, I let my mind drift backward, not deliberately, but the way it does when a pattern finally makes sense. After that first rent payment 14 years ago, the requests didn't escalate immediately. They softened, spread out, wrapped in politeness. Medical bills were next. My dad's back injury. Insurance delays. We'll pay you back once it clears. It never did. Neither did the balance. Then my mother's dental work. Then Mark's community college tuition when his grant fell through. Then my sister's divorce attorney retainer, just a loan she promised. I covered it without blinking. At some point, the asks stopped coming with explanations. They came with assumptions. You'll handle it. You always do. I became the person they called after they'd already said yes to something they couldn't afford. The person who got looped in once consequences appeared. When Mark bought a used car with a transmission problem, I paid the mechanic directly. When Renee's card declined on a girls' trip, I Venmo'd her while she stood in line, embarrassed but not ashamed enough to stop. And I told myself stories to make it easier. They need me more than I need the money. Family shows up. It's temporary. But temporary has a way of settling in permanently when no one pushes back. The dynamic leaked into everything. At holidays, I was the one asked to bring extra sides, since you don't have kids. I was seated wherever there was space. At my mother's birthday one year, they forgot to include me in the toast lineup. I didn't correct anyone. When I bought my condo, my sister joked, "Must be nice not having responsibilities." Everyone laughed. I smiled like it didn't land. Inclusion, I learned, was conditional. I was welcome as long as I didn't need anything. As long as I paid my share and then some. As long as I didn't ask to be centered. The phone buzzed again. Renee this time. Mom's really upset. You could have at least told us if you weren't coming. I stared at the message, noting the careful wording. Not why I wasn't coming. Just that I hadn't announced my absence properly. I typed deleted, then set the phone face down. That evening, I went home and opened the drawer beneath my desk. Inside were things I rarely touched. Old checkbooks, loan documents, insurance policies I'd co-signed years ago because it was just easier. I laid them out across the desk like evidence. There was the emergency credit card I'd opened for my parents after a hurricane scare. The account was still active, still linked to my income. There was the storage unit lease in my name because Renee needed a place to keep furniture between apartments. That was 6 years ago. She never moved it out. And then there was the life insurance policy my mother had asked me to take over payments on temporarily when my dad retired early. I'd paid into it for 8 years. 8. I hadn't thought of myself as naive, just loyal. The next morning, the tone shifted. Mark called twice before I let it go to voicemail. His message was clipped. Did you pull funding from the joint account? My card got declined. Joint. That was generous. The account was mine. He was an authorized user. By lunchtime, my mother called again. This time she left a voicemail, voice tight with controlled frustration. This isn't like you, Ariana. We raised you better than this. I laughed, out loud, alone in my office. Better than what? Than boundaries? Than opting out of a system that only worked if I stayed silent? That was when the truth settled fully into place. They weren't confused. They weren't hurt. They were inconvenienced. I went home early that day and made another spreadsheet. Not the emotional kind. The factual one. Accounts. Assets. Dependencies. I didn't feel angry as I typed. I felt methodical. By evening, I had a list of every place my name appeared where it shouldn't have been permanent. Every support channel that flowed in one direction. I sent exactly one email. Effective immediately, I am reviewing and restructuring my financial obligations. Please direct any future requests through formal channels. No blame. No accusations. Just notice. The response was immediate. Renee, what does that mean? Mark, are you serious right now? Mom, we need to talk. I didn't reply. I went to bed early and slept through the night. That was new. For the first time in years, I wasn't anticipating the next emergency. The next ask. The next moment I'd have to prove my usefulness to earn my place. And somewhere between drifting off and waking up, a thought surfaced that felt both terrifying and relieving. If I stopped paying, who would they be to me? And if they stopped calling, who would I finally be to myself? I didn't announce what I was doing. That was the first thing people misunderstood later. They kept waiting for a confrontation, a group call, some emotional outburst they could react to. It never came. Instead, I spent the next 48 hours doing something far more unsettling to them. I stopped. I stopped cushioning consequences. I stopped smoothing things over. I stopped fixing problems that weren't mine to solve. Wednesday morning, I called the bank and removed Mark as an authorized user on the account he'd been calling joint for years. The representative didn't question it. Why would she? The account was in my name. It always had been. It took less than 5 minutes. That afternoon, I emailed the storage company and gave 30 days' notice. The unit was emptied by the end of the week. I donated what was salvageable and disposed of the rest. I didn't ask Renee what she wanted. She'd had 6 years to decide. On Thursday, I met with my financial advisor during lunch. He'd known my family's situation in broad strokes, enough to be concerned, not enough to interfere. This isn't impulsive, I told him before he could ask. He nodded. It doesn't read that way. That mattered to me more than I expected. We went through every account methodically. Emergency funds I'd quietly built just in case. Auto payments I'd set and forgotten. Subscriptions that weren't mine. Insurance policies that benefited everyone but me. By the time I left his office, 3 standing transfers were scheduled to end at the close of the billing cycle. I felt lighter, not triumphant, precise. The panic started that evening. Mark called again, this time from an unfamiliar number. I let it ring. Renee texted next. This is getting weird, Ari. Mom's really upset. Why are you doing this now? Doing what exactly? Reclaiming my autonomy? Refusing to subsidize people who had decided I didn't belong at the table? I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my email and found a message from the restaurant manager. We noticed the anniversary dinner reservation has been partially refunded. Should we expect the remaining balance today? I forwarded it to Renee without commentary. Her reply came back almost instantly. Why would you do that? I typed 1 sentence. I assumed I wasn't included. There was a pause, longer this time. Then my mother called. I answered on the 4th ring. Ariana, she said, already exasperated. What is going on with you? The phrasing was familiar. Concern framed as disappointment. Authority implied. I'm reorganizing my finances, I said calmly. That doesn't explain why Mark's card declined. It does, I replied. You just don't like the explanation. She sighed, sharp and theatrical. You're being dramatic. I almost laughed again. No, I said. I'm being accurate. Silence on the line. I could picture her, standing in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, already waiting for me to soften. This family depends on you, she said finally. That was the moment. Not needs. Not appreciates. Depends. I know, I said. That's the problem. I hung up before she could respond. Friday morning, I signed the paperwork to begin the process of transferring the townhouse utilities fully into my name. I'd left them partially subsidized for years, telling myself it helped my parents manage. What it really did was delay reality. By noon, the water and electricity accounts reflected the change. No interruption, just a shift in responsibility. The first voicemail came an hour later. Ariana, my father said, voice tight. The power company is asking questions. Can you call them? I deleted it. That afternoon, I did something I'd avoided for a long time. I opened the folder labeled property and reviewed the deed. My name. Alone. No shared ownership. No ambiguity. I called a realtor. By Saturday morning, the townhouse was appraised. The market was strong. The listing could go live within days if I chose. I hadn't decided yet. I didn't need to. The point wasn't to punish them. It was to stop protecting them from the consequences of choices they'd made while assuming I'd always catch them. The messages multiplied over the weekend. Renee, you're tearing this family apart. Mark, you can't just abandon us. Mom, we don't understand why you're acting like this. Still no apology. Still no acknowledgement. Just confusion that the system had stopped working. On Sunday night, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. A cousin I barely spoke to. Your mom is worried about you. We all are. If something's wrong, you don't have to handle it alone. I closed it without replying. That's when I realized something crucial. They thought this was a breakdown. Because the idea that I'd chosen this, that I'd calmly evaluated the dynamic and opted out, was more threatening than the idea that I was unstable. Unstable people can be managed. Boundaried people cannot. That night, I slept deeply again. On Monday morning, my phone buzzed before my alarm. A message from Renee. We need to talk today. This can't wait. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I replied with exactly one line. Please put it in writing. The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, why are you being so cold? I set the phone down and smiled. Because for the first time in 14 years, I wasn't trying to earn warmth from people who only valued me when I was useful. And somewhere in that quiet, between unanswered messages and undone favors, something irreversible had begun. They were learning what life felt like without my safety net. And I was learning what peace felt like without their approval. By Tuesday morning, the concern had turned strategic. I could tell by the change in language. The messages stopped asking what was wrong and started suggesting who I was becoming. That's always the pivot point. When people can't control your actions, they try to control the narrative. Renee sent a voice note this time. Her tone was soft, careful. We're just worried about you, Ari. You've been under a lot of stress. Maybe you should talk to someone before making big decisions. Translation, you're not allowed to decide this while sane. Then my father emailed, formal, restrained like a memo. This family has always supported you. We deserve a conversation before irreversible steps are taken. I read that one twice and felt something finally click. Supported me how, exactly? By letting me shoulder everyone else's risk? By seating me at the edge of my own family while counting on my credit score? Still, I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my files. I hadn't planned to go there yet. I wanted space first. Time. But escalation has a way of forcing clarity. I created a new folder on my desktop and labeled it documentation. Inside, I began pulling records, bank transfers, wire confirmations, insurance payments, screenshots of late-night messages asking for just a little help, mortgage statements where my name appeared alone, tuition invoices I'd paid directly to avoid embarrassing conversations. It took hours, not because the information was hard to find, but because I'd been so consistent. By mid-afternoon, I had 14 years of quiet support laid out in clean, undeniable order. Then the calls started coming from outside the immediate family. An aunt I hadn't spoken to in years left a voicemail. Your mother's heartbroken. Families shouldn't keep score, sweetheart. A cousin texted. I heard you're cutting everyone off. That doesn't sound like you. They all used the same phrase. That doesn't sound like you. As if the version of me who absorbed everything without complaint was the only one that counted. That evening, my partner Luke called me from work. His voice was careful, measured. They reached out, he said. Of course they did. What did they say? I asked. That you're overwhelmed. That you might be making decisions you'll regret. And what did you say? He paused. I said it sounded like you were finally making decisions for yourself. I closed my eyes. Something in my chest loosened. That was when I understood something important. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about access. Wednesday morning brought the next escalation. A shared Google Drive link appeared in my inbox. No message. Just the link. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a neatly organized folder titled Family Planning, Next 6 Months. My breath slowed as I clicked through. Budgets, timelines, notes. And then I saw it. A spreadsheet labeled Projected Contributions. Rows listed my parents, my siblings, and then me. Not by name. By initials. AC. Amounts were already assigned. Confident. Final. Rent support for mom, $9,000. Car maintenance for dad, $1,500. School fees for Mark's daughter, $6,200. Emergency buffer, $18,000. Total projected by June, $52,700. No question marks, no conversations planned, just expectation. I scrolled further. A tab labeled Contingency. If Ariana resists, emphasize family values. If needed, involve extended family. Remind her how much she owes us emotionally. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. That was the moment anger disappeared entirely. What replaced it was clarity, so sharp it felt surgical. This hadn't been careless. It hadn't been unconscious. It was operational. I wasn't a daughter or a sister in that file. I was a funding source. I downloaded everything. Printed it. Then I opened my own archive and added one final document. Title page. Summary of financial contributions, 14 years. I listed totals only. Conservative ones. I didn't include emotional labor. Didn't quantify holidays missed or dignity swallowed. Just money. The final number sat at the bottom of the page, quiet and devastating. By Thursday afternoon, I had my attorney review it. He didn't flinch. "This is clean," he said. "And overdue." I drafted the message myself. No emotion. No accusation. Effective immediately, all financial support previously provided by me is terminated. Any jointly connected assets will be reclaimed or liquidated. Future communication should be directed through legal counsel. I attached the documentation. I sent it at 4:18 p.m. Then I turned my phone off. I went to the gym. I cooked dinner. I slept. When I turned my phone back on the next morning, it vibrated so hard it slid across the counter. Missed calls. Voicemails cut short. Messages stacked on messages. I didn't read them right away. I made coffee. I sat by the window. I let the quiet stretch, because I'd learned something crucial. Silence was the one thing they couldn't tolerate. When I finally opened the messages, the shift was unmistakable. "Renee, is this a joke?" "Mom, please call me right now." "Dad, we need to discuss this privately." "Mark, you can't do this." Not "why are you hurt?" Not "what did we do?" Just panic. I smiled. Not because I enjoyed it, but because it confirmed what I'd known all along. The moment I stopped paying, the relationship collapsed under its own weight. And for the first time, I wasn't holding it together. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It unraveled in stages, like a carefully dressed illusion coming apart thread by thread. By Friday morning, the messages had changed tone again. My mother stopped calling. My sister stopped pretending this was about my emotional well-being. Even Mark went quiet. Silence, I learned, wasn't their strength. It was mine. Late that afternoon, a new email appeared. Subject line, "Can we reset?" It was from my mother. 4 paragraphs long. Measured. Almost gentle. She wrote about stress. About how hard the year had been. About misunderstandings, and how words can be taken the wrong way when emotions run high. She mentioned my childhood. How close we used to be. How proud she was of me. Then, in the final paragraph, she wrote, "If you could just reinstate the rent support for December, we can talk about everything else after the holidays." I stared at the screen until the words lost shape. That's when it finally sank in. They still thought this was leverage. A tantrum. A phase. A negotiation. They didn't understand that what I'd done wasn't reactive. It was terminal. That evening, I went through with the thing I'd been circling for days. I listed the townhouse. The realtor moved quickly. Interest was immediate. Offers came in by Saturday morning, higher than expected. The market didn't care about family dynamics. It only cared about paperwork. By noon, the utilities were officially transferred. By evening, the access codes to the security system were changed. I didn't announce it. I didn't need to. The first frantic call came at 7:26 p.m. My father. "Ariana," he said, breathless. "We can't get into the house." I let the silence sit between us. "The code isn't working," he continued. "There are people coming tomorrow. Your mother's friends. The caterer." "I'm aware," I said calmly. "What is happening?" he asked. "What should have happened years ago?" I replied. "I'm separating my life from yours." He raised his voice then. Not angry, afraid. "You're punishing everyone." "No," I said. "I stopped protecting you from reality." I ended the call. Saturday was the day everything collapsed. Apparently, my sister had invited guests for a pre-holiday gathering at the townhouse. Coordinated outfits, decorations, a photographer, plans I hadn't known existed. They arrived to locked doors and dark windows. My phone exploded. "Renee, are you serious right now?" "Mom, there are children here." "Mark, fix this." Still no apology. Still no accountability. Just urgency. I didn't respond. Instead, I sent one message to the family group chat, the one I hadn't spoken in for weeks. "Please direct all communication through counsel. This matter is no longer personal." Someone renamed the chat 10 minutes later. "Let's heal." The irony almost made me laugh. By Sunday, extended family began reaching out again. Not to ask what happened. Not to check on me. To ask me to fix it. One aunt said I was embarrassing everyone. A cousin said this wasn't how strong women behave. Another warned me I'd regret this when my parents were gone. I deleted the messages without responding. That afternoon, Mark showed up at my door. I watched him through the peephole before opening it. He looked wrecked, unshaven, jaw tight, the same look he'd had every time he needed something and didn't want to say please. "You left us stranded," he said immediately. "No," I replied evenly. "You stranded yourselves." He scoffed. "You've always been dramatic." I leaned against the doorframe. "And you've always been dependent." That landed. He tried guilt next. My niece. My mother's blood pressure. How stressed everyone was. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When he finished, I said, "Do you know what none of you asked me?" He frowned. "How I was doing." Silence stretched. Then he said, "We're still your family." I looked at him carefully. "No," I said quietly. "You were a system that worked because I kept paying into it." His face hardened. "Mom says you've changed." I smiled. "She's right." I closed the door. That night, I slept without interruption. On Monday morning, the townhouse went under contract. On Tuesday, the final financial withdrawals were processed. Emergency accounts closed. Automatic payments canceled. Insurance policies reassigned. One by one, the safety nets disappeared. And with them, the illusion of unity. The messages slowed. Not because they understood, because they were adjusting. I received one final email from my mother midweek. Families shouldn't keep score. I didn't reply, because families who don't keep score also don't keep spreadsheets planning how to use one person until she breaks. By Thanksgiving morning, my phone was quiet. No invites. No demands. No guilt wrapped in concern. I made myself breakfast. Slowly. Deliberately. I wasn't alone. I was free. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to earn my place in my own life. December arrived without fanfare. The phone remained mostly silent. No voicemails, no panic texts, no extended family interrogations. The quiet was almost strange at first, an absence I didn't know I needed until it arrived. I made my own plans for the holidays. No pressure to coordinate anyone else's schedule, no expectation to finance someone else's joy, no anxiety about being allowed to participate. I bought a small tree, roasted a chicken, and invited Luke over. That was it. Simple. Honest. Mine. The first time I noticed it, the real weight lifting, was while I stirred gravy at the stove, the smell of rosemary and roasting vegetables filling the kitchen. I realized I hadn't thought about their reactions in hours, maybe for the first time in years. My chest felt light, my mind uncluttered. My energy, my focus, was my own. Messages trickled in slowly at first. My mother's were careful, clipped. "We miss you." My sisters were even more strategic. "Can we talk?" Mark sent a string of emojis, almost pleading. None asked why or acknowledged the years of silent sacrifice. I didn't reply. I simply archived them. My life had shifted in such a way that their panic no longer moved me. I had reconstructed the perimeter. My boundaries weren't negotiable. They didn't provoke me, they simply existed. Mid-December, a thick envelope arrived from my mother. 4 pages, meticulously written, nostalgic, guilt-laden, with one request buried at the end, not for money but understanding. The same understanding they had always demanded I offer freely while taking everything I could provide. I held the envelope over the sink and lit a match. Paper curled, blackened, vanished. I didn't shred it. I didn't store it. I watched it disappear. Then I typed one sentence on a blank sheet. I can forgive. I won't be used again. I didn't include a return address. It never left the kitchen. That night, I sat on the couch with Luke, a blanket draped over my legs, candlelight flickering across the walls, and realized that my life was finally, truly my own. The following weeks were calm. The Thanksgiving they had planned without me passed quietly. Photos appeared online. Paper plates, fold-out chairs, a cake that said grateful misspelled. No one tagged me. No one mentioned me. And I didn't care. I was not absent. I was present. For myself. By January, even the extended family had learned that their attempts to mediate or guilt me were ineffective. They stopped. They sent the occasional checking-in message. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Silence, I now understood, wasn't emptiness. It was a shield. One Saturday morning, I went for a walk in the park. Snow dusted the benches, the air crisp, the sky wide. I passed a family arguing over nothing, a couple struggling with 2 kids. I smiled. My peace wasn't performative. It wasn't conditional. It didn't need witnesses. It was quiet, solid, unwavering. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the girl I was at 23, the one who thought generosity meant erasing herself. I imagine reaching back through time to tell her, boundaries are not betrayal. Silence is not weakness. You are allowed to exist without apology. I keep the receipts, the spreadsheets, the documentation. Not out of anger. Not out of a desire to prove anything. Memory fades. Evidence doesn't. And someday, if clarity is needed again, I will have it. But for now, it's archived. Safe. Hidden. Just in case the past tries to reach me uninvited. Friends comment on the change in me. How calm I am. How grounded. How no one else's chaos seems to penetrate. They don't know the quiet battles behind it. I smile and say nothing. Peace, real peace, rarely requires explanation. Marcus asks if I ever regret the silence. I tell him no. Silence is the language I finally speak fluently. The rest of the world, the family, the obligations, the expectations, they are optional. And sometimes I allow myself a small indulgence. A luxury not measured in dollars or effort, but in moments fully mine. A morning coffee in sunlight, the warmth of a blanket, the laughter of friends who value me for me. I savor them because I earned them, not as recompense, not as leverage, simply because I finally understand what it means to exist without being indebted to anyone but myself. When I close the laptop at night, I breathe fully. When I wake up in the morning, I stretch without apology. No one gets access to this life unless I allow it. And the difference is subtle, yet everything. My energy isn't borrowed. My joy isn't rented. My voice isn't muted. 3 months later, I received one last message from my mother. Simple. Quiet. Kelly, we miss you. I don't understand why it had to go this far. I read it once. Then again. Then I left it unread. I went for a walk in the cold, sharp January air, and felt warmth I hadn't known for decades. Peace had arrived quietly, not in confrontation, not in tears or apologies, not in explanations. It arrived in boundaries kept, in accounts reclaimed, in silence respected. It arrived in the knowledge that I had finally, unequivocally, given myself back the life that had always been mine. And that life, silent, solid, unshakable, was enough.